Good morning. My name is Tim Kraychak. We're really excited that you're able to join us here for episode 6 of our Modern Analytics Framework conversation. Figured I'd give Jeff a quick introduction and a little bit of perspective on sort of the way we're thinking about how to evolve a modern analytics framework in your business. So Jeff, the next slide. Thanks. As I mentioned, I'm Tim Kraychak, the CEO at Ironside. Jeff Spear leads our information management practice. Ultimately, we're going to talk about a few topics to kick off, and then Jeff will summarize his thoughts over the last 4 or 5 weeks. We really appreciate everyone taking a few minutes to join us here, both in person and then with the recording. And love to engage and have dialogue specifically about what you're doing and how you're thinking about this concept of moving to a cloud-based modern analytics framework. Ultimately, at Ironside, our goal is to help you, our clients, make better decisions about your business. Information and databases and tooling and process all sort of make up the structure of a mechanism to make decisions. And our intention in these dialogues and in these conversations is to provide some best practice, provide our point of view, give you a framework to think about how to evolve, how to improve, and how to be a better provider of information inside of your business. The next slide, please, Jeff. So at Ironside, there's a number of aspects of what we do. Much of what we're talking here is in sort of the advisory and the design, helping understand current state and put a plan together to move to a more agile, effective, and efficient delivery of information and tooling. Obviously, specifics around how to organize data, specifics on how to integrate technologies and tools, specifics around how to provide an experience that your users actually want, and they're more effective, they're more able to have access and easy access to the tooling and data elements that are necessary to support their exploration, their discovery, and their information needs. Clearly, the assets we do that with are, data warehouses and lakes, all kinds of visualization, dashboarding, and reporting, and then obviously leveraging AI and machine learning as well. We have a deployment team that does installations, upgrades, migrations. We do all kinds of things around governance and data. Obviously, as your organization gets bigger, you're growing by acquisition and disposition. There's a lot of data governance issues. There's processes. There's a lot of things that we help with in that area, and then a management and a managed services team that helps with sort of all of the aspects of keeping these technologies alive. So it provides a pretty reasonable cost solution to the fact that it's difficult to find people, the fact that it's difficult and inefficient to manage just one environment. From our standpoint, we manage many environments for our customers, and we can do it at a lower price point than often you can, and as such. And sort of all of these things provide a set of offerings and capabilities, both in terms of advising strategically as well as tactically delivering an efficient and effective modern framework. The last thing I'll mention is that, we've been in this world for 20 years, right? And we know that while there's a desire to move to a future state or an agile state of cloud analytics, there's often significant legacy data assets, tooling assets, databases, processes, et cetera. And, from our standpoint, this isn't the idealistic aspect of a new modern platform. We recognize that there's significant assets, content, and dependence on these legacy warehouses, these legacy reporting systems, and these legacy tools. So we maintain a significant base of capability around those technologies, as well as helping our clients to move to a more modern agile process. Next slide, please, Jeff. So the modern analytics framework, mostly through Jeff's voice, we've discussed a number of elements of that framework. One of the questions, and I'll sort of leave it to Jeff to dig into both the high-level aspects of that in a minute. One of the questions that's come up to us is, the conundrum of, centralizing and organizing, as opposed to the concept of ease of access and self-service, right? So one of the benefits of going down the path of a modern analytics framework and providing the tooling and the interfaces and the organization and the data catalogs and sort of all of these aspects is you allow your team and your users to be self-sufficient in what they do. That being said, many of those decisions are going to be mainly informed by what we sort of call enterprise data. And enterprise data is trusted, known data that is often used in mode 1 reporting. Trusted enterprise harmonized data is often the basis for a discovery. It's often the basis for a machine learning model, and we will enrich that with either third party, with local, with public, all kinds of other data assets. So the modern analytics framework is intended to provide all of the base enterprise data assets, as well as a tooling and an ability to bring together, assets from outside of that. So while it is centralized, while it is managed, while it is governed, it's intended to be sort of the basis for that discovery, and then ultimately, the flexibility that this whole process is intended to supply. Next slide, please, Jeff. So ultimately, as we think about our conversation today, the goal is to tie together each of the different elements that we've spoken about over the last few weeks. Week 2 was really sort of identifying known business analytic value. What is identify and ingest new and existing data sources? Who is understanding the knowledge worker population that may be or will be or should be accessing the data that will be provided on that modern analytics framework. And then week 5 was really the methodology for developing new insights from that, right? So ultimately, as you think about this framework, it's a process of known data assets, unknown data assets, a set of people, a set of technology, and a set of methodologies. So at this point, I'll hand it off to Jeff, and he'll provide some more in-depth insight into some of those concepts and thoughts. And I'll come back at the end if there are questions. But again, we do greatly appreciate you spending some time with us. We'd love to, again, take the questions at the end, but also engage separately and dig into your specific problems and use cases, and appreciate you taking the time with us. So, Jeff Spear.
Thank you, Tim. Like Tim talked about, we sort of talked about some of the details, the why, what, who, how, and we made a lot of suggestions of sort of things that you can do to address those questions. And today we're sort of going to take a more of a holistic approach and sort of take those things and say, okay, what are those things? How should I do them? What order should I do them in? What steps do I take to evolve to a modern analytics framework? So this is the three layers of the framework. And so at the top, we've got the insight generation process, where you bring data in, you generate insight, you assess the value of that insight, and you deploy it to an audience. And one of the main concepts of the framework is that when you deploy it, you bring it down here to this layer of automated value delivery. So you've got, instead of having the people who generate the insights be responsible for refreshing it, you've got different people who are doing that refresh, whether it's to a dashboard, an ML model, a data dump, and that automation is done within this middle layer of data as a service. And so you have a variety of sort of levels of refinement in here, ranging from raw data lakes up to very refined data warehouses, but with a lot of different data zones in between. And so the idea is that you find the right level of structure and automation for the insight, and you automate it appropriately. And so you've got an appropriate level of work. Not everything gets the level of development necessary or refinement necessary to go into a warehouse. And so you have more moving parts, but those parts are more efficient. There's less development, and there's more time for people to generate insights. So as we talked about the various solutions and techniques and things that you should do to build a modern analytics framework, it really came down to four sort of overall areas, I guess. And so these are the areas. This is in general the order that you should probably tackle them. It's not going to be completely linear or sequential. You're going to start the early ones, and you may start some of the later ones, after that, and then keep doing them. So this work will be done in parallel. But generally speaking, this is the order that we would recommend taking them on. So the first step is to assess. You need to understand what's going on in your current state. You need to understand where you want to be in terms of future state. That will help you create governance, the structure, people, process, tools to manage all this. Like we talked about in week 4, this model has a lot less development, but it has some more management because there are more moving parts, there are more people involved, you're trying to get people to coordinate and work together, and that takes some governance to make that work. Then you want to create your solution architecture. That's the design step, and that's going to be, it's going to vary based on the stuff that you discover in the assessment, the governance strategy and policies that you are creating, as well as your current state. And then you're going to build it out. And you're going to create the right data structures, data zones, data lake, data warehouses, automation for those pieces, and sort of put into place one step at a time the pieces of the analytics framework. So in the assessment, these are the things that you want to look for. From a current state perspective, this is where you discover your existing business value. This is where you can start to create or update or refine your data catalog. This is when you discover your knowledge worker population. We talked about this in the WHO. There's a range of personas from data scientist to consumer. They use different tools. They use different types of data. They want different things from their data. And so understanding who these people are, how many of each category you have is extremely important, because that's going to affect what kind of data zones you build, what kind of tools you use, and what expectations you're going to have in the governance process. When you talk to those people, when you talk to people, stakeholders and subject matter experts, you're going to discover pain points. What's not working so well, what needs to be fixed. And you're going to see, are there existing governance structures and activities? Many organizations already have a governance group. Maybe they're doing some of the work that you need done. Maybe they're not, but they have organizations that could help with that. So understanding what governance already exists is very important. And then the other part of the assessment is to look at future state. So what goals exist for future business value? What use cases need to be addressed? And what governance domains and subject areas do you want to cover? So getting a sense of this, and if you already have some of this, that's great. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel, but taking what you have and then plugging in the pieces that you don't have, and maybe double checking what you have, because maybe there's a piece that was missed or that has changed since you reviewed it. But having all these things in hand is very important to taking the next step. So the next step is to think about governance. And in a sense, governance is, in particular, understanding this insight generation process and making sure that there are policies and processes in place to make all of these steps as efficient as possible. So, many of the governance domains, many of the governance processes directly make these things easier. And so it is an ongoing process, as governance is, to look for bottlenecks that are emerging in these and alter your governance processes to address them. So governance has a number of categories, and these are things that, as you go to implement governance, you're going to want to put in place. So the first is structure. You want an overall organizational structure for governance. Usually there's sort of, like a high-level governance board. There's more tactical stewardship committees, and you want to make sure that that structure is inclusive. Governance works because it is collaborative, and being collaborative means involving all the relevant stakeholders. You want to come up with a governance model. We promoted in week 5 a lean governance model, where you apply governance at different levels based on how much the data is being used and how valuable it is to your organization. So data in the lake, for example, might receive very automated or minimal manual review, whereas data in the warehouse is going to have a lot more in terms of annotation and definition and data quality and stewardship. So a lean governance model is one way to help make your governance more lightweight by focusing the governance on the data that is in higher demand. And of course, you have to think about change management. So, to the extent that you're changing existing governance or bringing in governance for the first time, ways to make sure that this gets adopted successfully. In particular, this should be something where people understand that they're working together. They're working together to provide business value, and so that they see that these activities are, activities which lead to value, which is helpful to everybody, not just rules that have to be followed. So once you have structure, you're going to create processes in various subject areas, and this is going to vary by, by organization. I've included the ones here that are most likely to be relevant for a modern analytics framework. There are others that we covered in the previous week, but these are the ones that are most likely to be relevant. The first is data quality. As you pay more attention to your data, you are very likely to find there are issues that need to be resolved. So having processes for identifying data quality issues and addressing them, either through pushing the errors back to someone who can correct them, business rules, automated update, but tracking data quality is almost always important in a modern analytics framework. A data catalog and dictionary is pretty much always important in this framework, and that's because you're taking data and you're putting it in multiple places. It's in a lake, it's going to be in data zones, it's going to be in a warehouse, and people need to understand where it is, where they can find it, what the difference is. I've got orders in the lake, I've got orders in the warehouse. Well, what do we do? What's different between those two? And maybe there's orders in a data zone, that represents an intermediate state of the data. So that's extremely important, and is something that should always be a part of a modern analytics framework. As part of that, you want to think about data ingestion. So great, I go out and create a catalog for all of my data sources. I'm going to get new data sources. So the process needs to be a process for, okay, here's a new data source. How does it get added to the catalog? And how do we do whatever entries are needed to make sure people can find it and use it and understand what it means. Similarly, there needs to be an automation process. So this is where the insight goes to automation. So a knowledge worker creates a new insight. There should be a process by which the team that does the automation says, okay, here's the most important thing to automate. Let's figure out what the value is. Let's figure out what data zone it should be in, and let's create that automation. And maybe, okay, as often happens, we have a backlog, we can't get to everything right away. So here's an interim plan where we're going to use, a script or a data wrangling tool or some other mechanism on a temporary basis until that automation is in place. What you want to avoid is what happens a lot nowadays, where the temporary process is the permanent process. So you have people updating Excel spreadsheets or, creating automation in data wrangling tools that becomes permanent ETL and is harder to find and identify and maintain. And then the third one is master data management. And this is definitely the most optional of the three. It will often be the case that you find data that you want to master, but you don't have to. So you need people to run these processes. You want to make sure that stakeholders, data stewards, subject matter experts, as well as the teams doing the analytics and the automation are involved. And then tools. Tools are an important enabler, but they are not the solution. So you want to find out what the right tools are for the subject areas that you're working on. So a data catalog tool is common, but you may say, hey, we're small, we don't have much data, we can use a wiki, or we can use a spreadsheet that works for us. So you want to find what works for you, and you don't necessarily need to buy something that is, overkill for the solution that you need. So the key thing to remember when you're doing this is you want to limit governance. We talked about, when we talked about governance, that you want to limit governance by what subject areas you govern, what data you govern, and how much you govern it. And limiting all those things will make governance smaller and more incremental and more likely to succeed. Then you need a solution architecture design for data as a service. So this implements the the zones that we've talked about. You want to have space for sandboxes. You're going to have your automated ETL or ELT, and you want to have a migration plan, how to get to this from whatever you have now. If you're starting from scratch and you can do net new, that's great. Maybe you have something and you can just tweak it until it becomes enough like this that you're happy with it. But maybe you say, no, we've got a warehouse and we want to do this as net new, and eventually we'll decide whether we want to migrate the warehouse into it or sunset it and replace it. And so that's a decision that you have to make as you do your design. What zones are you going to use? That's going to vary by organization. So in this model, there's an unstructured zone, which is a data lake, a feature store, which for data science, denormalized for tools like Tableau, and then a structured zone for sort of advanced, sort of SQL data engineers who have more data available here than a warehouse, but it's in a fairly structured format, so they can really go to town with it on SQL. So this solution architecture is going to vary based on the needs of your organization, the needs of your knowledge workers, and the insights that you have. And then lastly, build it. So you want to build, there's a number of elements to this. You want to have a data wrangling solution. One of the things that makes a modern analytics framework work well is having good data wrangling tools and a sandbox, so people can say, hey, I'm going to make a new data result. I need a place to put it that I can easily put data into that other people can access. We recommend a cloud presence for that. That gives you the potential for elastic compute and storage, so you could have a sandbox that can scale up or scale down. If it's not being used, you're not paying a lot for it. When you need it, it's there. Obviously, from a governance perspective, you want to make sure that the sandbox doesn't become a de facto warehouse. So you want policies to get stuff that's in here to the other areas. And then you want to make sure you have visualization and analytic solutions. So you want to make sure that your knowledge workers can look at the data and see the trends and insights they're looking for, but then that also they have the right way to get those out to the right audiences in the right way. So there can be different tools for different audiences to make things easier to visualize. And we strongly recommend that this be implemented incrementally. You want to find something that gives you quick time to solution. You want to apply it. You want to see how it works. You want to learn some lessons, and then you want to apply those lessons to the next time around. That also lets you evolve your governance and makes the governance easier to implement if you're doing small pieces at a time. You try to implement this all at once, and it's just much more likely to take too long. People lose interest and not succeed as much as you would like. So really coming at it in those steps is the best way to sort of move step by step toward a modern analytic framework. So to summarize, you want to start by assessing your current state and your future state before diving in. It's very important that you understand, who is in your organization generating insights, who is there doing automation, do you have governance in place, what data sources do you have in place, and where do you want to be. Governance is essential. You want to start working on it early. You want to, get everyone involved, make sure people understand that this is a collaborative effort and they're all working together toward a common goal. the design for the framework is going to be different based on your enterprise, your knowledge workers, your data sources, and your data needs. And then once you have it designed, you want to build it incrementally. You want to measure success and apply lessons learned. And then lastly, this is sort of an overall reminder that you want to deploy the right tool, but remember the tools are only part of the solution. Without the people in the process, the tools aren't going to do what you need. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in for hopefully all 6 weeks. We hope this has been helpful to you, and if you have any questions now or later, we are happy to answer them.
Thanks, Jeff and Tim. And please, if anybody has additional questions, please put them into the question window. And in the meantime, we have a couple that have been teed up, Jeff. You mentioned to sort of start with an assessment. We know our current systems and our requirements. Do we have to start with an assessment?
I mean, if you know everything that you need to know, then you've done the work and you can get going. I would strongly advise that you at least sort of double check. You know, often either things evolve, or especially when you're trying to identify governance needs, or find all your knowledge workers, it might be worth just sort of looking in the corners to make sure there aren't any that you sort of skipped. It's easy to say here are the main ones and not get the lesser ones. But yeah, there's absolutely no need to repeat work that you've already done. Just maybe go through the list and make sure that it's all there.
Jeff, I'll just add to that. I think that one of the benefits of an outside assessment is perspective from other clients and other combinations of technology. I think sometimes when you even if you're educated on sort of what you have implemented, having an outside view does have value, in the sense of you can look broadly across things that you may not have chosen to implement. So that's just my perspective on that.
That's a very good point. And actually, the other thing that it can do is having an outside voice recommending, especially on the governance side, bringing everyone together. It could have a more positive impact than a group within the organization trying to say the same thing. It just creates a more sort of neutral, friendly environment to start that process.
Great. So one more, a couple more. Can we start without a data warehouse?
Can you start? Yes, you can. It is entirely possible to create a modern analytics framework initially without a warehouse, or even eventually without a warehouse. The challenge is that most organizations have a large set of knowledge workers who want a data warehouse. People who are not sophisticated report authors, who want to be able to go somewhere where they can sort of drag and drop and create reports easily. And that's what a data warehouse is good at. So if you don't have those people, you're a smaller organization, everyone's very data savvy, you might not need that right away. So it is possible. You just want to understand the drivers and your knowledge worker population to make sure that that's a good option.
Thanks. And what about this one customer has a governance team, but it's not succeeding? What should they do?
So yeah, that can be challenging, because you don't want to create a competing governance team, because that's not going to help anybody. So obviously you want to understand what the problems are, why it's not succeeding. Is it a question of not everyone is engaged? Is it a question of it's doing the wrong things? The most common challenge we see is a governance group is trying to do everything, and that makes it hard to succeed at any one thing. And so it may make sense to say, hey, we're doing this new effort. Maybe you guys can we focus our scope on this, get it up and running, and then you can go back to doing a broader audience of things. So overall, you definitely, even if it's not working well, you're better off working with them than trying to set up something that competes.
Yeah, one other point on that, Jeff. I think that from our standpoint, as we've looked at our clients and their success or lack of success with governance programs, I think having a cross-functional, both business and IT team is important, and that is maybe stating the obvious. Additionally, having individual owners for domains of data. If there are multiple people that own something, no one owns something. So it's sort of some best practices around governance, which we can certainly discuss more in depth. Those are often causes of lack of success or lack of progress around data governance, even if there is something in place or a program in place or a team in place.
So I think what you're saying sort of runs into this question. What rules does lean governance use to decide how much to govern different data?
That's a good question. So it can use, there's different rules that it can use. Overall, what you probably want to do for lean governance, at least the way we promote it, is to have the triggers based off of demands for or usage of data. So, data comes into the data lake and it gets very light governance. And then at some point, people are either going to ask to say, hey, can you put this in a different data zone for me? Or they're going to start using it more. And so, either by query logs or by talking to the teams that do the movement, you can say, hey, this data is getting more attention and I want to apply more rules to it. And as the data moves up the chain into the warehouse, you'll be able to know that that's happening. You'll be able to look at access to it and apply those rules. So really it's demand based, it's interest based.
We're just going to do one last question because we're running out of time, but please everyone know that you can schedule time with Jeff for a one-on-one session, and we would be happy to answer any further questions. So Jeff or Tim, how do you determine what data needs master data management?
So master data management is definitely a question of business value. It can be a very time-intensive process, and so what you want to do is identify pain points that are costing your business. The common example is we don't know who our customers are. We have 8 copies of the same customer, and so we have no view of what that customer is ordering because their orders are spread across 8 different account entries. And if we understood that, we could cross-sell better. We could do things like that. We can do better lead generation. So you want to have identified business value, and the thing to remember is that may lead you to a domain. Okay, we need to master our customers. It may even lead you to a subset of data within that domain. We have customers in this system, the data is particularly bad. So you want to focus your master data management efforts on the tightest scope possible that's going to give you a return on value, so that you can do it more quickly and more efficiently, and then you can decide if you want to expand it based on the return.
Yeah, and Jeff, on that point, I think there's the fix a critical problem, but then also have a process to maintain the master data over time. Because the reality of it is there's a reason why it's gotten out of sync or it's gotten out of control. So it's not only fixing the urgent problem of this stuff is a mess, it's also putting a system and governance process in place that it does not become a mess again, right? And in terms of prioritization, clearly things like customer type, business entities or business dimensions that are important for analytical, work are the ones that float to the top of the list from a mastering perspective, in my experience.
Yeah, customer and product are the big two.
Right, of course.
I think that wraps it up for today and for our modern analytics framework. You want to close it out, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's on the left is our 6-week series, which is now coming to a close, but on the right is our continuing list of Thursday topics. So we've got something on the Cognos audit extension, which I know from personal experience is an excellent secret weapon for getting a better view of your Cognos installation. So please tune in for that Thursday at 10 and some of these upcoming ones as well. And thank you everyone for tuning into this series.